Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. We made it to Friday. Donald Trump has made it clear that he will stop at nothing to get his prized, precious, I carry around a picture of it in my pocket, golden ballroom done. Even as his base and members of his own political party and the courts all tried to slow or stop him. Now, as support for funding his ballroom becomes politically toxic, there's brand new reporting that finds that the companies that have donated toward the demolition and rebuilding of his golden ballroom have received federal contracts worth billions of dollars. Washington Post is reporting this, quote, more than half of the publicly identified donors to Donald Trump's White House ballroom project have won new or expanded federal contracts collectively worth more than $50 billion during the past 6 months. That's according to a report by a government watchdog group. 14 of the 27 known corporate donors to the $400 million project, which would replace the East Wing that Donald Trump demolished in October, have seen their government business grow in that window. That's according to the report from Public Citizen, a nonprofit group. The new report focuses on contracts awarded in most of the 7 months since the East Wing's demolition, which Trump's critics have argued created new urgency around potential conflicts of interest. Of the known donors, no single contributor received more new business with the government since giving to the project than Lockheed Martin. That defense giant received roughly $43.8 billion in new or expanded contract funding since last fall, according to the report. Booz Allen Hamilton followed with more than $4.2 billion, and Palantir with just over $1 billion. Other donors that received new or increased contracts include Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Caterpillar, and T-Mobile. Altogether, more than two-thirds of the corporate ballroom donors, 19 of 27, have received government contracts over the past 5.5 years, totaling $338 billion, according to the report. Now, many of these companies were also facing federal enforcement action as or while or before they donated to Donald Trump's pet project. On that, the Post adds this, quote, 16 of the 27 donors are facing federal enforcement actions or have had such actions suspended by the Trump administration, the report found, including major antitrust reviews involving Amazon, Apple, Meta, and NVIDIA, labor rights cases involving Google, Lockheed, and Meta, and securities matters involving Coinbase and Ripple, whose cases have been dropped or scaled back under Trump. The White House tried to push back on this Washington Post report, saying this, quote, the same critics who are alleging fake conflicts of interest would also complain if American taxpayers were footing the bill for these long overdue renovations. Well, White House, you got us there. As if they weren't pushing for $220 million, though, in taxpayer funds for their ballroom project as it is. As the Trump administration works overtime to justify all of this, the courts may halt them in their tracks. A federal appeals court today heard arguments to see if any of the construction, which has taken place already, is legal, and to decide if it will be allowed to continue at all. The court is expected to rule in the coming weeks. Donald Trump figuring out yet another way to monetize his presidency as he seeks to turn Washington, D.C. into a gold-leafed monument to himself is where we begin today. Staff writer at The Atlantic, video podcast host David Frum is here. Also joining us, Media Matters for America. President Angelo Carasone is back with us. And joining us, the co-president of the group that compiled that very important report, the co-president of Public Citizen, is here, Robert Weissman. Robert, take us through the report's key findings and just add some context to what we already highlighted.
Yeah, well, you hit the top level points, but it's exactly what it seems. That more than 24 companies are giving a huge amount of money for regular people, but not for them, to pay for Trump's ballroom. And they're not doing it out of any sense of civic engagement or because they love their country. They're doing it because they've got huge business interests before the government. Primarily government contracts, which, as you said, total more than $50 billion in just the last 6 months, more than $330 billion over the last 5 years. But not just contracts. They've got all kinds of interests, policy interests, and crucially, more than 2/3 of them were facing federal enforcement actions, whether it's antitrust lawsuits or civil rights enforcement actions or unlawful firing of worker cases. And they are hoping to receive kind treatment from the president that they are helping fund. And there's every reason for them to expect that this is going to be a very worthwhile investment and a huge return for them, and more contracts, less enforcement, and more favorable policy decisions.
Let me follow up on that piece of it. The contracts being awarded are so gobsmacking, but it feels like the enforcement being halted is in some ways more insidious. And when you look at the way Todd Blanche has seemingly gleefully embraced using DOJ to carry out Trump's will, I wonder if you can just talk about the severity of the kinds of enforcement actions which appear to be impacted.
Yeah, well, as a general matter, we're seeing an unbelievable pullback on enforcement against corporations. At the same time, as you suggest, the administration, now led by Todd Blanche at DOJ, is weaponizing government enforcement against individuals that Trump perceives to be his enemies. We've seen that in the pardons that he's given to people who are well-connected, who are paid lobbyists to get pardons. We've seen that in the cases at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where the ongoing cases were designed to protect people from the most vicious of financial predatory lenders and schemers, and effectively all of the enforcement is dropped there. The government actually tried to undo an already completed settlement and apologize to the company that it enforced against on a civil rights case. The judge wouldn't let that go through. That's a sign of how severe this is. And as you suggest, these are discretionary decisions. The government really has a lot of flexibility to choose to proceed or not. Of course, they should, where the law says they should. But there's a lot of discretion to make the decision yes or no. And of course, these companies are expecting, if they're given $1 million, $5 million, $10 million to Trump's pet project, that they're going to get favorable treatment when prosecutors or enforcement agents are looking at whether to proceed or not. And they're being shown to be correct.
Robert, in doing this work, have you ever seen anything like this on the scale of this and as brazenly public as this?
Nope. No, I mean, the government undertakes, like the response from the White House is hysterical, right? The government undertakes projects all the time. Of course, in Washington, D.C., to develop monuments, maintaining monuments, we've got all of these museums. The government pays for this stuff. And when it doesn't, it's done through really careful and authorized processes. There's nothing like destroying half the White House without getting congressional authorization and then seeking to pay for the rebuilding of a ridiculous ballroom by a handful of corporate donors and super billionaires. No, nothing like that has happened in recent memory or any memory or ever in American history.
David Fromm, you are one of the people whose commentary on this story as the East Wing was being bulldozed has stuck with me since those, and I remember those shows. I remember I sit here in front of a picture of the White House and their live shots, and I remember wanting to put a live picture behind me because Trump made a mockery of every use of sort of the iconography of the People's House, right? He bulldozed it actually. And for all the stories that we've all tried to tell for 9 years, I don't know that anything shows instead of tells the story of his appetite for destruction of that which doesn't belong to him, like bulldozing the White House and letting corporations pay him to rebuild it.
Look at how you framed the story at the very top of the segment. You see, you said, we've caught the government, public citizens caught the government, accepting hundreds of millions of dollars of bribes, for which it is compensating, repaying the bribers by giving them tens of billions of dollars in public benefits, in contracts, and who knows how much in relief from enforcement actions. Hundreds of millions of bribes go in, tens of billions of public dollars go out. And when asked, why are you taking all these bribes? The answer is, well, the public would never have agreed to pay the taxes for the president's project. So we had no choice but to take the bribes, because if we'd asked Congress for the money, Congress would have said this is a stupid idea. But the core theory of American government, the fundamental engine of the Constitution, and before that, of the British Constitution from which the American Constitution was derived. The core idea is the executive has no money of its own. That anything that the executive needs to do, anything that the executive is entrusted to do, the way it is funded is people's representatives in Congress or Parliament vote the taxes, they vote the spending, and then after this vote, they vote in Congress or Parliament for the taxes and the spending. Then the executive does as it's ordered to do. Donald Trump's core project in the second term has been developing streams of money that he can just take for himself. Whether it's the money from tariffs that are imposed illegally without Congress, whether it's the slush fund through this sham litigation he orchestrated and then dropped and then created $1 billion or $2 billion worth of slush fund money, plus a bribe for himself in the form of no enforcement action against him ever, or this. The object has always been create money that the people's representatives don't control. And this is, it is hard to imagine a more fundamental attack on the basic logic of American government, for the president to have his own money that he takes through sham litigation, through illegal tariffs, or through bribes, and says, well, you don't want to pay any taxes, are you? You're paying the taxes. You are paying for this. You're just paying for it much more because you have to pay tens of billions of dollars of contracts to collect the hundreds of millions of dollars of bribes in the first place.
Oh, my God.